Welcome to video 2.4, and this will likely be the last of our weapons videos, and we'll move on to putting some enemies into our game. And in this video, what we're going to do is actually implement an energy system so that the player can't shoot their weapons forever at full power. Because these weapons are going to be very powerful, but we want to give the player some kind of decision to make while they're playing of like, should I be attacking the entire time or should I stop attacking to let my energy recharge? And so that's what we want to implement. We want to add a UI element that's going to represent the player's energy level, and then as well as some icons to indicate which weapon they currently have selected. So let's begin setting that up. So we're going to want some more sprites to do this. And so I'm going to import a few new sprites. I'm going to make a new group first. So I'm going to create a group, and this is going to be called UI for user interface. And I am going to right click it, and I'm going to create a new sprite. This one is going to be called SPR underscore energy underscore back. This is the backing bar for the energy meter in the game. So I am going to go to import, and under the UI folder, under bars, I'm going to select the GUI frame bar frame 2. These ones have like hit point frames on them, so I don't want those. I just want this one. Yes. And now I am going to switch its anchor point from the top left to the middle left, so that whenever I'm instantiating this, I just have to target that point, and then it will fill out to the rest of it. All right, I'm going to close that. We're going to create another one called SPR underscore energy underscore bar. This is going to be the actual energy bar. So I'm going to import another one. Now I imagine you could probably take the white bar and then just tint it, but I'm going to go with, let's do the yellow one. Mostly because blue would indicate like shields or something. So we're going to use yellow to indicate our weapon energy. And so again, I'm going to switch the origin to be the middle left so that I can just kind of target that point right there. Now we need a few more things. We need a sprite, new sprite. This is going to be called SPR underscore weapon underscore active. And I'm going to import. That is this one that is the lighter gray, box light gray. We want that. And then hit yes. I'm going to leave the anchor point to the top left just because that's going to, if I'm just consistent about this, it'll be easy for me to remember. And I'm going to create one more called SPR underscore weapon underscore inactive. And then import. This will be the dark gray one that's up. So it looks like it's an unpressed button. And then same thing, I'm not going to really adjust anything. I will make a mental note that it is 40 pixels by 40 pixels. That's going to come into play later. All right, so we've got our UI elements. Let's going through closing a few windows. And so now that we have our UI elements, we're going to need an object to display them. And so that's where we're going to need to create some kind of invisible actor that manages the state of the game. And so I'm going to create a new object called Game Manager. So I'm going to right click objects and create a new object called obj underscore game underscore manager. Now, it's not supposed to be seen, so I don't give it a sprite. Kind of the thing here is I don't want to uncheck visible because I believe that's going to prevent the drawing, the UI drawing from happening. So normally, like when I have like a game manager or a level manager, this is the object that's going to contain all of the scripting for the behavior of the game. We don't want to put that logic on the player. We don't want to put that logic on the asteroid, because if the player is destroyed, then there's no more logic to handle like respawning the player or saying game over. So we're going to want some kind of invisible object that persists to remember all this stuff, and that's going to be this game manager. Normally you might pick like an obnoxiously colored sprite, just so that you can be reminded that it's in the level, but we'll know pretty quickly if our UI is not showing up. So let's begin adding some stuff for this. First off, let's add a key pressed R. This will be useful later. This is just going to restart the game. And this is just the command game_restart. And that'll be useful once we start playtesting. It's just you push R, the whole thing resets. I usually put that in there for just debugging purposes. It's almost like a cheat key. Now let's add the event for drawing to the screen. This is going to be draw. Now, I suppose you probably could handle it in draw GUI, but for the purposes of this project, we're just going to stick with draw. We're just going to draw it directly onto the screen. And so here's where some of our computation gets a little bit mathy, for lack of a better term. So this is the description of this is draw going to draw our weapon and energy UI elements so that we can see how much energy the player has left, or how much or what weapon they currently have selected. Although before we start writing this code, we might need to add the instance variables to the player just so that I can start referencing them here. So I'm going to jump over to the player object, and I'm going to add a new variable here called energy_max, and I'm going to set that to 100. And then I'm going to add another one. These are real numbers, called energy. And, oh, not energy max, just energy. And I'm going to leave that at 0. I'm going to add events on the create step of the player. And I was just going to mention when the player is created, we're going to set energy equal to energy max. A little bit extra, but that way I only have to change one variable if I want to change the player's entire max energy. That way, like, I don't have to, like, if I set this to 100 and then maybe later on in the game player can get 200 energy or like 120 energy, I only have to like deal with energy max as being that maximum level, and then the code will automatically update your energy to the max at the start. All right, so now that we have these instance variables, we can reference them inside of the UI drawer. So we're going to go back to Object Game Manager, and we're going to begin putting the code here to draw the energy bars manually. So we're going to, rather than having them exist as like an object, we're going to just draw them on the screen as a sprite. So first up is we're going to define the position we want the energy bar to be at. So I do this because that's a little bit easier to change if I want it. I'm just going to do 1010, which would be the top left of the screen. Now, if you wanted other positions, you could also do relative to a few other variables. So some useful variables for here is room_height will give you the lowest Y value, and room_width would give you the furthest right X value. I guess instead of lowest, I'll say the bottommost. So you could do something like var y position equals, so instead you could do room underscore height minus 50. And so then this would be 50 pixels up from the bottom of the screen. So you could play around with that. I'm going to put in the top left. You could use room height and room width with a little bit of kind of math to get it to appear in like the top right, the top left, or the bottom right, wherever you would want it. So this is going to go into the top left. This will be the width of the bar, which is actually going to be independent of the actual sprite. We're going to render it to this width and height ourselves. And I kind of chose these relatively arbitrarily, but slightly not. If we look, the bar itself is a height of 28, and the width is 400. And this is meant to be able to kind of scale on the X and look okay. I didn't really want to scale the height much, so that's actually why it's going to be 28, and instead of 400, it's only 20. So we chose 20 and 28. So this is going to draw the backing frame. So it's going to draw this one, the one that's just kind of like the container for the bar. So we want draw underscore sprite underscore stretched. So this is going to draw it. It'll scale it essentially. SPR underscore energy back. Now that's the name of the sprite we're drawing, comma, which frame, so if it had a multi-frame animation, which frame of the animation we want to draw, comma, the X position we want it at, so X underscore position or pose, comma, Y underscore pose, comma. Now, here's where we could probably use the same widths and heights. I could, but I want to actually show you the way that you can just request it. Sprite underscore get underscore width, SPR energy back. That will get the width of a sprite that hasn't been instantiated yet. And we were dividing that by 2, comma, sprite underscore get underscore height, SPR underscore energy back. Pretty long line. So there's that full line. Now, we could have just done this instead. The height was... That line of code would function identically to this. So this just kind of is a fancy way to, dynamically grab the actual width of the sprite before it's been instantiated. So you can kind of choose which way. Maybe you just want to hard code the numbers, and that's okay. So now we want to check to see if the player is alive. If the player is alive, draw the energy bar. Because the stat for energy is located on the player. So if the player's been destroyed, we don't have an energy stat. So if instance underscore exists of obj player, so if there's an instance of the player, then this if statement will activate. But we still need to get a reference to that. So we're going to grab a reference to the player object by saying var player underscore instance equals instance underscore find, and then the name of the object we want to look for, and then which one. Now that's a pretty shady thing. You could possibly iterate through, you could probably count how many instances there are, and you could probably loop through all of them if there was multiple players. But we want the 0th player. And so that's going to get basically the oldest instantiated copy of a player. So if you had, for some reason, 2 copies of the player object, which you really shouldn't do, this would get the original copy. So I will say that this could get a little bit wonky if you're instantiating multiple copies of the player. But other than that, it will find the oldest version of the player that exists. So we need to calculate the size we want to draw the energy bar at. So this will be a variable called energy underscore ratio. And that's going to be, so now we can reference the instance variable in the player by saying player underscore instance dot energy divided by player underscore instance dot energy max. So this is just going to be a value from 0 to 1. If the player has full energy, this would be 1. If the player has no energy, this is 0. If the player has half energy, it's going to be 0.5. So this just calculates how much energy the player currently has. And then we're going to generate the width of the bar. So energy underscore width equals bar width times energy underscore ratio. So the width of what we said we wanted our bar to be times this value. So if you have no energy, it's 0. Should be pretty straightforward. That does lead me to think, I think this shouldn't be 200. Let me double check. Yeah, because that's half of this should be 208. So this should probably be 208. And then actually draw the energy bar. So we're going to use that same draw sprite stretched, draw underscore sprite underscore stretched SPR energy bar this time, comma 0, comma x position plus 4 because it's basically an indent of 4, y position plus 4, energy width, which is the value that we calculated, and the original bar height because that we want to be largely static. So if we want to play test this, we just have to insert a game manager into the game world, and we should see that we'll have an energy bar. Now, we don't use it yet, so the player's not actually spending or gaining energy, but if we were to insert this into the room by just dragging a copy of the game manager, it doesn't matter where you put it because it's going to manually place it, and you can see it comes in as this like little question mark. If you need a list of the instances inside of your world, if you click on instances, you can actually see a list of all the things that you've dragged and dropped in here, and you can manually delete from here. So in case if you've accidentally threw several game managers on here, you can just hit one of these and press the delete key to remove it. And so we can see our wonderful energy bar is up there. We go under it because it's a UI thing. And you can see it is framed. And actually, if I turn off the background, and I'll turn off the background for this video so we can actually look at it in more detail. So you can kind of see it up there. As far as like the height and thickness of it, that is the structure of the bar. So that looks reasonably good. All right, so let's we're gonna actually interface with that in a second. Let's put the rest of the code for showing if the weapon, which weapon is currently selected. So this code down here is going to deal with showing the current weapon. So same kind of issue. The player needs to be alive for us to know what weapon they currently have equipped. So I'm going to say var current weapon equals 0. Basically meaning they might not have a weapon equipped yet. If instance underscore exists, so I'm doing that same thing, checking for the player. And I'm doing that same player instance command I did up here. Then I'm going to update the value of this current weapon variable to be player underscore instance.current weapon. Now, if you're using a global variable for your current weapon, you don't have to go through this hoop. You can just set car weapon equal to global.current weapon and not have to worry about tracking down the player. So that kind of leaves something to be said for tracking like energy or current weapon as a global variable, because then you don't have to jump through the hoop of trying to verify if the player exists to be able to read that data. So let's put in some positioning. So I'm going to call this X position weapon to indicate where this is going to be drawn at. So this is very similar to this X and Y position. And so the Y position is going to be 50 because I want this to be under the energy bar. Then let's put a spacing, so how much space we want in between each of these. And I'm picking 50 because each sprite is 40 pixels by 40 pixels. And so that gives us 10 pixels of kind of buffer in between each icon that we're going to put here. I'm going to make an array out of my weapons, my sprites. So SPR player pulse laser, SPR player sonic laser, SPR Vulcan. Now, if you were doing this for real with a more serious artistic intent, you would probably design special graphics for like the weapon selector. I'm just taking literally a copy of their sprite and gonna paste it into this. So you'd probably want to make like an actual like kind of stylized icon for that. I'm just going to take the weapon graphic. Then let's loop through each of the weapons. So we would say for var, and now weapon is kind of like my iterator. I could call this for var I equals 0. While weapon is less than weapons effects dot. I don't remember the like command here. I just might manually say 3. So we're going to loop through each of the 3 weapons. Now I'm using weapon equals 0 here because the array indexes much like other arrays. So this would be index 0, index 1, and index 2. So just as a reminder, that's how these things index from. If the current weapon is equal to weapon plus 1, so that's kind of a little bit of a, like, because we call it weapon 1, weapon 2, weapon 3 inside of the code for the player. So if the player has the pulse laser selected, then current weapon is going to be equal to 1. So I need to increase this counter by 1. So if it's the currently selected weapon, I want to use the brighter frame to show that that's the weapon that the player has selected. So we're going to draw that. Draw underscore sprite, SPR, weapon active, comma 0, comma X position weapon plus X spacing times whatever weapon I'm on. The Y position will be Y position weapon. Else, we're just going to draw this again, but we'll choose the inactive version. And then we're going to draw the sprite. So this draws the frame. And then we're going to then draw a sprite of the weapon. And so we'll just say draw sprites weapons underscore graphics with an index of weapon. The subimage is 0. And now this took a, well, I'm just going to kind of center it to the center of this. So I'm just going to do kind of this same formula. But if I do that same formula, it's going to put it in like the top left. So I'm just going to add 20 to it so that it tries to put it in the middle. It's a lot of code for what we're really trying to achieve here. So I'm going to hit play and I'm going to test this and see what this looks like. So I'm going to hit play. And we can see that I've got a weapon selector up there. If I press 2, it highlights that laser. If I press 3, it highlights my cannons. So based on whatever weapon I have selected, it's going to show a different picture there. So let's go through and add a font to this so that we can also display text, just an indicator of the number. So I guess I'm going to turn my background back on. So it can kind of look, that white is so jarring. All right, so let's make a new font. So if we want to start changing the font of things to make sure that we have like consistent control over what the text looks like, we do actually have to define a font. So we just right click and create a new font. The abbreviation for this is FNT underscore weapon underscore UI. Now the default font is Arial. So Arial 12 points is kind of the default GameMaker font that if you didn't specify a font that it's going to pick for you. But for this font, what I think will look good is Quarry or New. Now, if your system doesn't have that, you could play around with other choices. And I'm going to go with a 9 points font, bold. So I'm going to close out of this. I'm going to go back to the game manager, and I'm going to tell it to use that font and also put the name of the number next to each weapon graphic. So let's choose our font. So that command is draw underscore set underscore fonts, and I want FNT underscore weapon UI. We will put new fonts in here as we get floating damage text in like a game over screen or other, like a score read. We'll have different fonts, so we do need to specify a font for each thing we're trying to draw. And I'm going to also manually set the color to draw with, and I'm going to choose white. You can play around with this and pick a different color if you like. You could even change the font if it's the currently selected weapon. Maybe it could be blue instead of white. So we're going to then put a label on the weapon. So we're going to say draw underscore text. And again, we've got our I'm going to steal this code right here. The text that we want to draw is the string of weapon +1. Now this is going to put it in the top left. I mean, if we hit play, we'll see it right now. So we can see that when I was running this, that's going to reference putting the font up here on the top left of each thing. But I want it in the little bottom right corner of the graphic. So I'm going to add an offset to this of 27 for the X and 23 for the Y. And then when I hit play, that actually looks pretty good as to which weapon goes where. And so I'm pretty happy with that. So the last thing we have to do is actually go through and apply the energy to the player so we can see how that's going to work. And this is actually going to be a very simple implementation. We're done with the UI related stuff. So here's the code for drawing the weapon, the current weapon. I'm going to scroll up and show the code for drawing the energy bar. Here's the code for the energy bar. And we're probably not going to revisit this for a good while, so I'm probably not going to come back to this object for a bit. So I'm going to close out of the game manager. We'll come back to the game manager like after we've put asteroids and stuff in the game. So we need to then deal with the energy of the player. So let's jump over to the player. And we've got an energy. So let's put a few other things in here. We'll add a variable called energy underscore regen. This is how much energy the player gets back per frame. So every frame the player will get 1 energy back. And if we can make this a little bit fancy, so let's go through and do that. Let's add an energy regen rate. And this is going to be a multiplier that, based on different states, the player might regenerate energy quicker or slower. What I'm originally planning is if the player has attacked, their energy rate is going to get slowed down, so that if you're attacking, you don't generate energy as quickly. So that does mean I need an energy regen cooldown tracker to know how long the player's energy regeneration rate is being penalized for. So those are my new instance variables. Let's go and put in some energy costs to my attacks. So that's going to require us to go to our attack script. And I'm going to add that to my stats for each weapon. So the pulse laser, we're going to call it just cost. We could call it energy cost if we want. The energy cost of the pulse laser will be 12. The sonic laser energy cost, this is that multi-shot laser, that'll be 18. And the Vulcan cannon energy cost, make that 4. And so we want to then also restrict my ability to attack. So whenever I'm attacking, in addition to choosing to hit the attack button and my cooldown being ready, I also want to make sure that I have energy greater than or equal to, I should probably put that inside of these if statements, because this is for each of my different weapons. So if the current weapon is 1, and my energy is greater than or equal to the pulse laser energy cost, then I can fire this. But let's also add the code that's going to cost us the energy. So we'll put that right after the cooldown. So we will say apply the energy cost. So energy minus equals pulse laser energy cost. Energy regen rate will be set down to 0.3. So you're going to only get 30% of your normal energy regeneration. Energy, where's my cooldown? Regen cooldown is going to be 4 times the default cooldown for it. So we're going to just do that. So my regen cooldown is going to be the pulse laser cooldown times 4. So I'm going to make sure I name that variable correctly. Yes. And of course, we can tweak these numbers. You can play with these numbers to get an effect that you like. So we just have to do that for all of our weapons now. We need to include this energy restriction. So if the current weapon is 2 and your energy is greater than the sonic laser's energy cost, we're going to do the same thing. So now we're going to take away the sonic energy laser. We set the regen rate to 0.3. Again, you can change that to whatever you want. And then the sonic laser's cooldown times 4. And then the final one for the Vulcan cannon, we will do Vulcan energy cost. And then I'm going to take the energy cost stuff, put it right after the cooldown. So when you're shooting this thing, again, we're doing a 0.3 regen rate. And we will do the Vulcan CD times 4. So this should cost our energy. Now, we don't regenerate energy yet, so I'm going to play test this, and I'm going to show that it's going to spend our energy as we attack. So when I hit attack, you can see that that bar is going down. It never comes back up because we haven't, there's my reset key, we haven't set that. And so let's go set that, and that'll be the final thing. So inside of player, during the end step, if we recall, this is where we typically manage stuff such as cooldowns or managing the energy. So we're going to say screen wrap, cooldowns, and energy management. So the code for all of this, I guess let's put here, regenerate energy. So our energy will plus equals our standard energy regeneration amount times the rate penalty. So normally that's 1, but if we fired a weapon, it's going to be 0.3, so we're going to generate things at 30% speed. Then we want to make sure we cap our energy is set equal to the minimum of energy max or the current value. So if that pushes us over 100, it sets us back down to 100. And then we want to handle the energy cooldown stuff. So if the energy regen cooldown is greater than 0, then We want to take away 1 from it, energy regen cooldown, minus equals 1. So we take away 1 from that counter, so we get closer to being able to attack again. And then if energy regen cooldown is now less than or equal to 0, then we restore our rate back to 1. So energy regen rate is now 1.0. And so that penalty that we applied to my energy regeneration is now gone once this reaches 0. So we'll be able to see that as we play test this. So I'm going to hit play. And when I attack, you can actually see it, like, the energy regenerates slower, then it starts ticking up after, like, a little while. And so the effect it's going to have on gameplay is, when I attack, I can shoot really fast. But if I keep on attacking, now my laser is really pathetic. So I have to stop attacking to let my energy recharge. And again, the shotgun effect is even worse. The little machine guns might be a bit overpowered. They might need to cost more energy, because you get a lot of shots out of those. So that's going to pretty much wrap that up. I'm going to rebalance these things' energy cost. The Vulcan cannon, I'm going to bump that up to maybe 6. Because it's dealing 8 damage per attack. Because you get 2 projectiles out of it. So it's actually dealing pretty crazy amounts of damage for the energy. So maybe that needs to be like a cost of 8. I don't know. You know, playing with the actual values, that's a lot of fun and a lot of math behind balancing all of this. So jumping back to here. Now, I'll post the complete scripts here, because these are pretty complicated. I'll post a link in the comment to the video so that you can make sure that your script is accurate with what I've got. But now we've got weapons, we've got a UI element to show what we currently have selected. And next up is going to be looking at adding some enemies to attack. So we're going to start adding asteroids to the game called Asteroids. So I'll see you then, and thank you for watching.